It was 2147. But in reality, 400, that number didn't mean anything anymore. People had ceased using clocks and calendars to keep track of time a long time ago. Time used to be a straight thread that was weak and cruel, pulling people from the past to the present and then to the future. But then the veil broke, and all of a sudden everyone could see in 10 different ways at once. At first, it was too much to handle. People fell to the ground in the streets, screaming at things that only they could see. They saw themselves as kids, grown-ups, and dead bodies all at the same time. They saw conflicts that hadn't happened yet start next to wars that had ended hundreds of years before. They looked at possibilities that seemed to go on forever, each one stacked on top of the other like a huge, impossible library of life. The physicians said it was dimensional convergence disorder. It was named enlightenment by philosophers. Governments labeled it a threat. But the folks who lived through the first wave of craziness called it the truth. In New Rotterdam, on a wet night, truth came to a kid named Kale. His vision opened out when he was only 17. At one point, he was staring at the puddles on the broken pavement. Then the puddles seemed to go on forever. He saw himself putting his hand in the water and not putting it in. Leaving, staying, drowning, breathing, all in one. Blinding moment. Kale held his head and gasped as the rain streamed up, down and sideways, making a spiral of liquid that the rules of physics could no longer hold. He saw his mother's face in the rains, but not how she looked now. Instead, he saw how she looked decades before and how she would look long after she died. She grinned, grimaced, screamed, and murmured throughout every potential timeline. He got down on his knees. The city surrounding him broke apart. The wind distorted the skyscrapers like glass, telling him how they were built, how they fell down, how they were rebuilt, and how they came back to life. Cars moved in every direction on endless circles. It wasn't that reality was broken. It was just endless. The enlightenment spread like wildfire. By the end of the week, many neighborhoods in New Rotterdam were empty. Some folks locked themselves inside because they were so scared of witnessing their loved ones die before it happened. Others bravely walked into the whirlwind of dimensions, laughing, speaking in riddles, and saying they had seen the great pattern. Religions broke up and grew. Some clerics said that the 10-dimensional sight was a punishment from God, a curse that showed too much. Some people liked it and built temples without boundaries, where people might concentrate on all the different versions of themselves. The Shapers were the most dangerous bunch of all, though. These guys didn't just perceive the options. They learned how to move between them. A Shaper could be your enemy, friend, killer, or savior all at the same time. Their choices weren't limited to one thread of reality. With each breath, they weaved whole tapestries of life. Governments sought to control them by calling them terrorists, criminals, or strange people. But how do you put someone in jail who has a lot of different cells and a lot of different ways to be free? For Kale, waking up was neither a blessing nor a misfortune. It was a question. Why him? Why now? As the days went by, he started to see other Shapers out of the corner of his eye. People who were both close and very far away. Men and women whose eyes glowed like stars falling down. They would nod at him as if they knew him not just in this world, but in thousands of others as well. One night, Kale heard a voice, but not with his ears. He heard it with every part of himself. The 10th gate is now open. Find us before the pattern eats itself. He didn't know what the gate was or who us was. But as soon as he heard those words, he knew that his life had already gone in many different directions. Some of them ended with his death, others with his greatness, and they all started now. That night, Kale didn't sleep. How could he? He could see the unending lattice of his lives every time he closed his eyes. There were thousands of Kales, each making various choices and taking different moves. Some of his versions were brave, some were scared, and some were already dead. It wasn't just a dream. It was real, like an endless web that sparkled with possibilities. He attempted to focus on one strand and hold on to one version of himself that seemed real. But the more he tried, the faster the other threads got away from him. His head hurt and his heart beat like he had been running for hours by daylight. The city was not the same as he staggered outside. The streets had become a stage for mayhem and amazement. A woman stood in the plaza crying and clawing at the air, begging her husband not to die. He was there next to her, alive and undamaged. A child laughed so hard that they couldn't stop grasping for shapes that no one else could see. And across the skyline, big rifts glimmered like fissures in glass, displaying pieces of other universes. And then he saw them again. The Shapers. They were waiting for him. 3 people in the dark, their shapes changing all the time as if reality couldn't make up its mind about what they should look like. Their faces changed between a lot of different people. Sometimes they were youthful, sometimes they were old, sometimes they were human, and sometimes they were monsters. The tallest one walked forward, and his words came from every version of him that could exist, not just his mouth. "Kale, you heard the call." Kale stopped moving. His throat got constricted. "Who are you? What do you want me to do?" Kale could see everything about the Shaper. Him teaching him, fighting him, killing him, and saving him. Every vision of the future pushed into his head like hot iron. The Shaper continued, "We are the Pattern's children. People who learned how to see the 10 dimensions and walk among them. You are one of us." Kale shook his head hard. "No, I can't even keep my thoughts straight. Every second I feel like I'm drowning in several versions of myself. I don't want this if this is what you are." The second Shaper, a lady with eyes that blazed with broken galaxies, walked forward. Her voice was lower, but it had a weight that Kale couldn't ignore. "You don't have an option. The Pattern picked you as soon as you could see beyond time. It will eat you up if you fight it. You might live if you accept it." "Survive what?" Kale said in a low voice. Finally, the third Shaper spoke. His voice was very different from the others. It was jagged and shattered like pieces of glass grinding against each other. "The fall. The Pattern is coming apart. Every reality is based on the others. If no one leads it, all the threads will eat each other. And you, Kale, are the one who has to choose which universes stay." The words hit him like a bolt of lightning. His chest felt constricted, and all of a sudden the visions came back. He saw cities on fire in 1,000 other worlds. He saw oceans rising, the sky splitting apart, and whole civilizations blinking in and out of existence like stars that are dying. And through it all, he watched himself making decisions and taking actions that spread over the web. "No," Kale said, shocked, and fell back. "I don't want this. I don't want to choose what happens to anyone." The Shapers stayed still. They just observed him, their bodies shimmering as if they were already moving to a different realm. The woman responded softly, "You already have. Every choice you make matters. Even the choice to run away changes the pattern. There is no way to get away from it." Kale's legs shook. He wanted to run, but he knew they were right. Every choice he made would have big effects. His life was no longer a secret. It was woven into the very fabric of reality. The tallest Shaper held out his hand before he could answer. "Come with us, Kale. Learn before it's too late. If you don't agree, the pattern will utilize you without compassion, and in other cases it already has." Kale looked at the hand. He took it in one vision and the world burnt. In another he said no, and the world stopped. He walked away in yet another, and he never existed at all. He was stuck in infinity. The only way out was to move forward. The Shapers didn't take Kale through streets or alleys. They took him through layers. He was walking along the broken pavement of New Rotterdam, with neon lights flashing above him. The next thing he knew, the air ripped apart like torn cloth and he was somewhere else totally. He was in an unending desert with 3 suns, and the sand changed into shapes that seemed like faces. He took another step and found himself in a jungle of glass trees with branches that moved like water. It wasn't moving through space. It wasn't a trip. It was moving. Kale folded along with reality. "Every choice you make," the tallest Shaper stated as they went, "leads to 1,000,000 different things. A lot of individuals can view these branches but not touch them. We, the Shapers, decide which branch to walk on." Kale's stomach turned. "What if I make the wrong choice?" The Shaper's face changed from man to woman to child to shadow. "There is no wrong, only consequences." They stopped in a cave that was comprised of broken light. The walls weren't made of stone. They were mirrors that showed millions of Kales looking back at him. A few were very scared. Some were sure horrible or godlike. The Lady Shaper said, "This is where you start. Here you will learn how to walk the pattern without losing yourself." Kale spun around slowly, feeling dizzy from all the reflections. "How? Just looking at all this makes me feel like I'm going crazy." The third Shaper, the one with the sharp voice, came up. "Then the first lesson is easy. Find the anchor." They were all around him. The cave was full with possibilities. Every time Kale looked in the mirror, it moved on its own and did something different. One smiled, one yelled, and one had blood coming from their eyes. The woman answered, "An anchor is the part of yourself that you choose to trust. If you don't have it, you'll break into an unlimited number of selves and never be able to come back." The reflections strained against the glass walls. Kale's heart raced. He thought of himself as a soldier, a beggar, a monarch, and a dead body. He tried to grab one, but it got away. Another one grabbed for him. its eyes empty and murmuring promises of power. He fell back, holding his head. Not possible. All of them are me. How can I tell which one is real? The Shapers shouted in unison, and their voices made a loud echo. None of them are real. All of them are authentic. You make the choice. The words repeated in his head until something changed. Kale understood that he didn't have to look for the right version of himself. He had to make a choice. He thought about his mother's grin as he closed his eyes. It wasn't across timelines, it wasn't broken, and it wasn't infinite. The same way Mom had stared at him when he was little and sitting by the fire during a storm. That warmth, that moment kept him grounded. When he opened his eyes, he saw his own face, stable, human, and alive in a mirror. He walked toward it. The glass rippled and the cave went quiet. The Shapers were watching. The woman nodded. You didn't drown. That's enough for now. But the Shaper, who had a rough voice, was not as nice. Don't confuse survival with mastery. The pattern is huge, and you've only seen a little part of it. The waves will be stronger next time. Kale fell to his knees because he was so tired. His chest hurt like he had been running for hours. But for the first time since he woke up, he felt centered. The tall Shaper crouched next to him, and his features changed to look softer. You are starting to walk. You will soon learn how to shape. But remember this, every move you make has an effect. There is another Kale somewhere in reality who is falling because of the choice you made here. The pattern isn't free. He was scared by the concept. Did he steal from another version of himself every time he made a decision? Or was it making? The cave started to disappear as he thought about the question. The reflections faded away, and he was once again standing in the decaying remains of New Rotterdam. There were sirens in the distance. The skyline was covered in smoke, but now Kale knew those weren't just regular sirens. They were echoes of war that were coming through realities. Something was coming that even the Shapers couldn't stop, and every step Kale took would help decide what lived. Word of the Shapers traveled quickly, through every network, every whispered rumor, and every shaky confession on the streets. People could already see an infinite number of copies of themselves, which made paranoia spread like a disease. If someone could traverse realities and change fate, who could be trusted? The first to act were governments. The United Coalition, a weak group of countries, called Shapers dimensional terrorists. There were broadcasts all over the place on neon billboards and hologram towers. These strange things are a danger to stability. Report it right away if you spot one. They are not true representations of people. Armed patrols march through the broken cities, their guns gleaming with experimental technology meant to stop spatial changes. Drones examined faces not to see who they were, but to look for flickers, which are signals that someone might be moving between realms. The irony was bitter. Soldiers could now see 10 dimensions, but they were told to deny it and hold on to a form of reality that was already gone. Religions also broke apart at the same time. Some people thought the Shapers were prophets who could walk on the holy fabric of creation. Some people called them devils trying to destroy God's plan. In the rubble of cathedrals, preachers yelled lectures to scared people. The 10th dimension is hell itself. These Shapers are its messengers. Do not go with them into the abyss. In other temples without walls, however, people lighted lights to revere Shapers as guides of eternity. In the streets, rival groups fought, chanted, bled, and prayed to different truths. From the shadows, Kale saw everything happen. He felt the net closing in on him more and more each day. Patrols roamed his area. Walls were adorned with posters featuring blurry faces that said possible Shapers. Fear made the air worse than smoke. He wanted to keep concealed, but the visions kept coming back. At times, he thought he was being carried away in chains. At times, he imagined himself standing on top of ruins and talking to crowds of people who either loved or loathed him. He felt like invisible hands were pushing against each option. One night, while he was walking through a market that was half on fire, a stranger grabbed his wrist. The stranger's eyes were full of despair. You can see it, right? The man said it in a low voice. The web, the layers. Kale stopped moving. The man wasn't a Shaper. He was just a normal person who was scared of what he saw, but he had a strong grip. Tell me my wife died last year. I can still see her. Which one is real? Kale's throat closed up. He wanted to say something, but all he could say was a lie. Finally, he said, "They're all real, but you have to choose which one to live with." The man's face fell apart. He let go of Kale and stumbled away, mumbling prayers. Kale's chest felt tight with remorse. Every meeting, every phrase was a break that made new roads. He thought about how many lives he had already ruined by merely being alive. The Shapers discovered him again that night. They came out of shadows that were moving. their shapes changing as if the fight itself was shaking them. "You see it now," replied the tall shaper. "The pattern is no longer a secret. Governments try to cage it, and religions try to define it, but none can hold infinity." Kale's jaw got tight. "And what about people like me? Are we just hunted down?" The woman's eyes shone like broken galaxies. "No. People like you will have to make a choice. The coalition will expect you to obey. The faith will make you give up. But the pattern doesn't ask for anything. It only wants you to keep traveling." The jagged-voiced shaper leaned in closer and his broken words cut through the air. "Kale, war is coming. It has already happened in a lot of other worlds, and in most of them you're in the middle." The next morning the sirens came back, this time louder and more forceful. Soldiers shouted orders via megaphones as armored convoys rumbled into New Rotterdam. Above them, a rift in the sky opened up, letting pieces of another planet bleed into this one. Kale stood at the end of the street, his heart racing. He finally understood what the Shapers had warned him. This wasn't simply about staying alive. His life was a pivot point. The choices he still had to make were affecting whole civilizations. The fight between faith and power had begun, and Kale was already a part of it, whether he wanted to be or not. The city was no longer a city. It was a battlefield that crossed several dimensions. Towers swung between states, whole, blazing, collapsed, rebuilt, overlapping like ghosts of themselves. There were chants, shooting, and prayers in the streets, often all at once. Every stride Kale took through the turmoil was filled with thoughts of what may happen if he put his foot down differently. A soldier looked back and saw him. The man pressed the trigger on one thread and Kale died. In another, Kale disappeared before the shoot. In another, the soldier didn't even see him. The weight of all the possible futures pressed down on Kale's chest. He stopped moving. Which one was real? Which one should he choose? The soldier lifted his gun. Kale lost it and something inside him broke. The world bent like paper. The sound of the gunshot faded into quiet. Kale blinked and was suddenly behind the soldier, his heart racing. The man looked about in confusion. Sure, he had seen someone, but there was no one around. Kale staggered back, breathing hard. He had seen more than just the options. He had gone into one. He hurried across the broken city, half in fear and half in awe. Some streets had fires while others had rain. Both were real. People yelled prayers to gods that might be real in one timeline, but not in another. Kale saw copies of himself everywhere he looked, fighting, running away, and giving up. He ran into the Shapers again at the edge of a plaza. They stood still in the middle of the turmoil, unaffected by the terror around them. "You shaped," the woman remarked with quiet pride. "Your first step." Kale's hands were shaking. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to live," the tall shaper answered. "That's how it starts. Survival shapes the shape. Choice makes it sharper." The shaper with the jagged voice moved closer and his broken words hissed like knives. "Now you know what power is. But do you know how much it costs?" Soldiers rushed into the plaza before Kale could answer. Their guns blazed and hummed with energy that was meant to keep Shapers in one timeline. "Get on your knees," one yelled. "You are under arrest by order of the coalition." People ran away. Some civilians screamed for help, while others called the military saviors. Kale's breathing sped up. He saw the options fade away. If he gave up, he would be chained, examined, and broken. Blood would stain the plaza if he battled. If he ran, people who weren't involved would die in the crossfire. The pattern spread out in front of him, with endless threads pulsating with meaning. The woman shaper put her hand on his shoulder. "Pick. Not every version of you will live, but the one that does will change this world." The soldiers took aim. Kale's vision broke up into thousands of scenes, each one ending in a different way. He made himself breathe and hold on. He thought of how warm his mother's grin had made him feel, which had helped him stay steady previously. He put his hand up. The air around him broke apart. The soldiers' bullets discharged, but in one thread they stopped in midair. In another they went through without hurting anyone, and in a third they bounced off walls that were no longer there. Kale walked to the side into a world where none of the shots had been fired. The soldiers gazed in confusion as their guns suddenly got chilly. It felt like time itself had let them down. Some of the civilians gasped and fell to their knees. "Prophet!" One person yelled. "No, a demon." Another person said angrily. Kale shook. His body hurt and his mind was tired, but he had done it. He didn't merely live. He had made the pattern on purpose. The towering shaper's face, which had several faces, bowed a little. "You've taken your first real step. But the pattern never forgets. Every action has an effect. You saved lives today. You might end them tomorrow without meaning to. Kale glanced at the scared soldiers, the residents who were praying, and the city that was on fire in the distance. He was horrified to find that no matter what he did, someone would always call him savior, and someone else would always label him executioner, and both would be correct. The plaza was still burning behind him, and echoes of dread and respect followed Kale as he ran into the broken night. Every darkness spoke to him in a million distinct voices, some praising him, some cursing him, and some urging him to take a different route. It was too much for his heart to take. The Shapers followed without making a sound, their shapes flickering in and out of alignment as if they were also having a hard time with the collapse. They finally stopped at the edge of a wrecked cathedral. When the woman raised her hand, reality opened out like a curtain. There was a nothingness beyond the breach that was full of woven threads of light. Billions of strands crossed and twisted in ways that seemed inconceivable. She murmured softly, "The loom, the heart of the pattern." Kale moved closer, his breath taken away by what he saw. Each thread sparkled with a life, a choice, and a planet. He saw himself on several paths, dominating countries, withering in jail, or disappearing into nothingness. He saw friends he had never met before, opponents he had never fought, and kids he had never fathered. Each thread pulled at him, asking for his attention and choice. The numerous faces of the tall shaper bowed toward him. "This is why you were picked, not to live in 10 dimensions, but to weave them." The pattern shakes. The loom breaks. Without a hand to guide it, all realities will eat each other. Kale's throat got constricted. "You mean I have to choose which universes will live, which die?" The shaper with the jagged voice screamed, "Not decide. Form. Every reality you care for gets stronger. Every world you leave behind dies. You can't hold them all. Infinity requires sacrifice." Kale looked at the loom. He had a lot of ideas about what could happen in the future. He chose mercy in one, and peace spread like wildfire. In another, he chose power, and empires grew from the ground up. In many more, he didn't choose anything, and everything fell apart. His eyes were burning with tears. He had never wanted this. He was just a kid from New Rotterdam who was having a hard time staying alive. And yet, every version of him was now on the border of infinity. He closed his eyes and remembered the only thing that ever calmed him down. His mother's smile by the fire. A moment that was whole and unbroken. That warmth reassured him that some things were still true, no matter how many choices there were. "I don't want to be a god," Kale said quietly. The woman's voice sounded like a lullaby. "Then be a person. People change the pattern even if they don't know it. You can see the threads more clearly now." The loom throbbed. In the distant, threads broke, sending waves of collapse across the space. Kale understood that there was no more time. Every time you said no or hesitated, you made a choice that made things worse. He reached out. His fingers brushed a thread and the world shook. There were flashes of images, armies laying their weapons, kids laughing, and cities emerging from the ashes. He gasped and let it go. There was another glowing thread nearby. He touched it and saw rivers of blood, skies ripped apart, and screaming that never stopped. He pulled back, feeling nauseous, but now he got it. Every thread had both optimism and fear in it. Every choice led to both good and bad outcomes. There was no perfect way, and everything came at a price. The voice of the towering shaper sounded like thunder. "So, Kale, will you mold the loom or let it burn?" Kale stood there shaking and stared into space. He thought of the soldier whose gun never went off, the man at the market asking for the truth, the people who dubbed him both a prophet and a demon. All of them are threads. They all lived because he was there. He took a deep breath. His hand was hovering above the loom. Then he smiled. "I will shape," he said. "Not because I was picked. Not because I deserve it. But I have to, or there won't be anything left to save." His hand went deep into the web. Light burst forth, taking him and everything else with it. For a heartbeat, or maybe forever, Kale felt every existence, every choice, and every chance. He was both drowning and flying at the same time. And then quiet. Some people claim that day was the end of Reality 400. Some people say it came back to life. There are murmurs throughout all dimensions of a kid who touched the loom and became its weaver, its prisoner, and its savior. But the truth is not something we can know. In the 11th dimension, the end and the beginning are the same. Welcome to Beyond the Fractals. Subscribe now and explore every reality.